Most people think keeping chickens means buying expensive commercial feed month after month, spending hundreds of dollars a year just to keep a small backyard flock alive. But what if I told you that chickens have been feeding themselves for thousands of years, and with a few simple systems you can dramatically cut your feed costs to almost nothing? In this video, I'm sharing 5 proven methods that let you feed your chickens for free using resources you already have access to, even if you're just starting out. If you're someone who wants real food security and self-sufficiency without breaking the bank, this channel is for you. I share practical homesteading and survival strategies like this every week, and subscribing means you won't have to search for reliable information again. It'll just show up. I'm really glad you found your way here. Let's start. Method 1. Kitchen Scrap Feeding System. This first method matters because it solves a quiet problem most people live with every day. You're wasting perfectly good nutrition while spending money on commercial feed, and it happens without you even thinking about it. The reason kitchen scrap feeding works is simple. It respects how chickens naturally eat and how real life actually functions. Chickens are omnivores. They'll eat almost anything you don't finish. This doesn't depend on perfect planning, special equipment, or complicated schedules. It works even on your busiest days, which is exactly why it lasts long term. To start, all you need is a dedicated container in your kitchen. If you already have an old ice cream bucket or storage bin, you're ready to go today. What you're doing is simply collecting vegetable scraps, fruit peels, leftover rice, pasta, oatmeal, and bread. No optimizing, no overthinking what goes in. To keep it going, focus on just one thing. Empty the container daily and avoid meat, dairy, and citrus. That's enough. You don't need a perfect system. Over time, this doesn't just reduce your feed bill by 30 to 40%. It changes how you think about waste in your kitchen. Less guilt about throwing food away. More efficiency in how you use every dollar. Your chickens thrive on nutrition you were literally tossing in the garbage. A small thing that makes this easier is freezing scraps if you can't feed them daily. You don't need to do this, but it smooths the process and prevents spoilage, especially in summer. Here's what most people get wrong about kitchen scraps. They think chickens can eat everything humans can. Not true. Avocado skins, raw potato peels, and onions can actually harm your flock, but cooked potatoes? Perfectly fine. Wilted lettuce? They love it. Stale cereal? Gone in seconds. The key is understanding that your chickens are basically tiny composters with feathers. They turn your food waste into eggs. That's the exchange. One family of 4 typically generates enough kitchen scraps to feed 3 to 5 chickens about 40% of their daily nutrition needs. If you're cooking from scratch regularly, that number goes even higher. This method works in apartments, suburbs, and rural areas equally well. Location doesn't matter, consistency does. See. Method 2. Growing fodder indoors. This second method matters because it solves the winter feeding problem. When fresh greens disappear and feed costs spike during cold months, most people just accept higher bills. You don't have to. The reason fodder works is that sprouted grains multiply their nutrition by 600% in just 7 days. 1 pound of barley seed becomes 6 pounds of fresh, living greens. It doesn't depend on outdoor space, sunshine, or any particular season. It works in a basement, garage, or spare closet, which is why it's reliable year-round. To start, all you need is shallow trays, whole grain seeds like barley, wheat, or oats, and a dark space. If you already have those basics, you're ready. What you're doing is simply soaking seeds for 12 hours, then rinsing them twice daily for 7 days. No special grow lights, no complicated hydroponic systems. To keep it going, focus on just one thing. Stagger your trays so you harvest 1 mat per day. That's enough to create a continuous supply. Over time, this doesn't just cut feed costs by 50 to 70%. It changes your chicken's health in visible ways. Brighter egg yolks, better laying consistency, fresh nutrition even when the ground outside is frozen solid. A small thing that makes this easier is using sprouting mats instead of soil. You don't need them, but they reduce mess and speed drainage between rinses. Here's the math that makes fodder so powerful. A 50-pound bag of organic barley seed costs about $30 in most areas. That bag produces 300 pounds of fresh fodder. Compare that to buying 300 pounds of commercial feed at 40 cents per pound. You're looking at $120 versus $30. That's a $90 savings from 1 bag of seed. Most backyard flocks of 6 to 8 chickens will go through about 10 pounds of fodder per week. That means one 50-pound bag lasts you 5 weeks. Your monthly feed cost drops from potentially $100 to just $24. The difference compounds over a year. We're talking about saving nearly $1,000 annually. But beyond the money, there's something else happening here. You're learning to produce food for your food. That's real self-sufficiency. When supply chains get disrupted or prices spike, you've got a system that keeps running. Your chickens don't skip meals because a truck didn't arrive. They eat because you know how to grow their food from seeds you can store for years. Method 3, composting with chickens. This third method matters because it solves 2 problems simultaneously. You're disposing of yard waste while creating a continuous protein source for your flock, and it requires almost no extra work from you. The reason compost-based feeding works is that decomposing organic matter attracts exactly what chickens hunt naturally: insects, worms, grubs, and beetles. Your chickens do what they do best: scratching, pecking, and hunting for living protein. This doesn't depend on you finding bugs or buying expensive dried mealworms. Nature does the work, which is why it's sustainable indefinitely. To start, all you need is a designated composting area your chickens can access safely. If you already have that space, you're ready. What you're doing is simply adding grass clippings, leaves, vegetable scraps, and letting chickens turn the pile. No special tumbling bins, no strict carbon to nitrogen ratios. To keep it going, focus on just one thing: add fresh material weekly and let the chickens do the rest. That's enough to maintain an active ecosystem. Over time, this doesn't just provide free protein and calcium from insect shells. It creates the richest, darkest soil you've ever seen for your garden. Less feed expense, healthier birds, garden gold as a bonus output. A small thing that makes this easier is using multiple small piles instead of one massive heap. You don't need to do this, but it gives chickens more active foraging zones and speeds decomposition. Here's what's actually happening in that compost pile. Within days of adding fresh material, the microbial activity heats up. That warmth attracts black soldier fly larvae, one of the best protein sources for chickens. A single larva contains 42% protein. Your chickens will dig through 8 inches of material to find them. As the pile cools and ages, it attracts earthworms. More protein. The worms aerate the compost while chickens harvest them. Then you've got beetles, sow-bugs, and other decomposers. Everything in that pile is either food for your chickens or becoming soil for your garden. The cycle is almost perfectly closed. Most people assume you need acres for this method. Not true. A 4x4-foot compost area can support 3 to 4 chickens with supplemental protein. Scale up to 8x8 feet, and you're feeding 8 to 10 birds significant portions of their diet. The key is keeping it active. Dry, inactive compost doesn't attract insects. Moist, regularly fed compost becomes a buffet. If you're also gardening, this becomes even more valuable. Your chickens turn waste into eggs and soil. That soil grows vegetables. Those vegetables feed you and create scraps that feed chickens. You've just created a food production loop that costs almost nothing to maintain. If this is making sense so far, give it a like. It tells YouTube to share this with people who need practical self-sufficiency strategies. And I'm curious, are you already keeping chickens, or are you planning to start soon? Drop it in the comments. I actually read them, and I'd love to know where you're at in your journey. Knowing your situation helps me create content that's more useful for where you actually are, not where some algorithm thinks you should be. Method 4, free-range foraging systems. This fourth method matters because it taps into what chickens were literally designed to do: find their own food, and you don't need acres of land to make it work. The reason rotational foraging works is that even a small suburban yard contains thousands of calories in seeds, insects, and greens. The key is not letting your flock strip one area completely bare. This doesn't depend on perfect fencing or endless space. Strategic rotation is enough, which is why it works in backyards that are just a quarter acre. To start, all you need is a mobile coop or temporary fencing to section your yard into zones. If you already have that set up, you're ready. What you're doing is simply moving chickens to fresh ground every 3 to 5 days. No permanent structures, no complex rotational schedules. To keep it going, focus on just one thing. Never let grass get shorter than 3 inches before rotating them out. That's enough to protect your pasture and maintain regrowth. Over time, this doesn't just eliminate 60 to 80% of feed costs. It transforms your property. natural fertilization, pest control. Chickens living exactly how they're meant to. A small thing that makes this easier is marking rotation zones with stakes or flags. You don't need to do this, but it removes decision fatigue on moving day. Here's the productivity difference between confined and rotational chickens. Confined birds eat about 1/4 pound of feed per day because that's their only food source. Rotationally grazed birds might eat half that in feed because they're getting the rest from foraging. That's a 50% reduction right there. But it gets better. Studies from the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association show that eggs from foraging hens have 7 times more beta-carotene and 3 times more vitamin E than confined birds. You're not just saving money, you're producing genuinely superior nutrition. The rotation pattern matters more than the space size. 100 square feet per bird rotated weekly beats 1,000 square feet accessed continuously. Why? Because concentrated impact followed by rest mimics how wild birds interact with land. They scratch, fertilize, eat, then move. The area recovers stronger. If you're in a suburban setting with neighbors close by, this method also reduces complaints. Chickens on fresh ground are quieter, cleaner, and far less likely to create odor issues. They're busy foraging instead of standing around bored. A bored chicken is a noisy chicken. An active chicken is a productive chicken. For those worried about predators, mobile coops actually increase safety. You're moving birds away from areas where predators learn to hunt. Static coops become known targets. Moving coops disrupt that pattern. Method 5. Partnerships with local businesses. This 5th method matters because it solves the problem of scale and consistency. You're getting large volumes of free feed regularly without taking up your time or land. The reason business partnerships work is straightforward. Grocery stores, restaurants, and bakeries throw away hundreds of pounds of edible food every single week. Food that's past sell-by dates but perfectly safe for chickens. They can't sell it, you can use it. This doesn't depend on knowing the owner personally or having special connections. A simple, polite ask about expired produce is enough. Most managers say yes because you're solving their waste disposal problem. To start, all you need is a 5-gallon bucket and one local grocery store or bakery within driving distance. If you already have that, you're ready. What you're doing is simply asking if you can pick up their expired produce or day-old bread twice a week. No special written agreements, no complicated logistics. To keep it going, focus on just one thing. Show up consistently on your agreed days. That's enough to maintain the relationship and their trust. Over time, this doesn't just provide unlimited feed. It builds genuine community relationships that matter beyond chickens. Zero cost, consistent supply. You're solving their waste problem while feeding your flock. A small thing that makes this easier is bringing clean containers and being flexible on pickup times. You don't need to do this, but it makes you their easiest waste solution, which means they'll call you first. Here's how to approach this conversation. Walk in during a slow time. Ask to speak with a manager. Say something like this. Hi, I keep backyard chickens and I'm trying to reduce food waste. Do you have any produce or bread that's expired but you're throwing out? I'd be happy to pick it up twice a week so it doesn't take up your dumpster space. Most managers appreciate the waste reduction angle. You're not asking for a favor, you're offering to help. When I started doing this, my first store gave me about 20 pounds per week. Within 2 months, I had 3 locations and was collecting over 100 pounds weekly. That fed 12 chickens almost entirely for free with just a small amount of supplemental feed for calcium and protein balance. The variety you get is incredible. Wilted lettuce, bruised apples, day-old bread, slightly soft tomatoes, all perfectly nutritious for chickens. Things that would cost you $30 to $50 weekly at full price. Different stores have different waste streams. Bakeries have bread and pastries. Grocery stores have produce. Restaurants sometimes have prep scraps like vegetable trimmings. Building relationships with 2 or 3 sources creates redundancy. If one stops, you've got others. The legal side is simple in most states. You're taking waste they'd pay to dispose of. No money changes hands, no liability, but verify your local regulations to be certain. Some areas require waste disposal permits even for food going to animals. Most don't, but it's worth one phone call to your county extension office to confirm. Bonus tip. Here's something most people miss, and it matters more than adding another feeding method to your routine. Instead of mixing all your free feed together randomly throughout the day, separate protein sources from carbohydrate sources and rotate them intentionally based on when your chickens actually need different nutrition. Chickens have varying nutritional requirements at different times. Morning is when they need protein most. They've just woken up, their metabolism is firing, and protein supports egg production that happens in early hours. This is when you give them kitchen scraps with eggs, meat scraps if you have them, or access to your compost pile where insects are most active. Afternoon is prime time for greens and vegetation. Their digestion slows slightly, and fiber-rich foods help them feel full without overloading protein. This is when fodder works best, or when you let them forage on fresh pasture. Evening is carbohydrate time. Grains and starches right before roosting give them sustained energy through cold nights. This is when day-old bread or whole grain scraps make sense. That single change often improves egg production by 10 to 15%, and visibly improves flock health without feeding them larger quantities. You're just timing nutrition to match their biological rhythms. It's the difference between randomly fueling a car versus understanding when it needs high-octane versus regular fuel for different driving conditions. Most people never think about this because commercial feed is formulated to be nutritionally complete at any time. But when you're cobbling together free sources, timing suddenly matters. You're not just feeding chickens. You're managing a small-scale nutrition program. The other piece people miss is water quality and availability. Free feed often has lower moisture content than commercial pellets. Your chickens will drink 30 to 50% more water when eating dry scraps versus wet mash. Make sure they have constant access to clean water, or your feed conversion drops dramatically. Dehydrated chickens don't lay well regardless of feed quality. You don't need to implement all 5 methods starting tomorrow morning. That's not how sustainable change happens. You just need one steady direction toward real food security. Pick one method from today and start this week, even imperfectly. Maybe it's just saving kitchen scraps in a bucket. Maybe it's calling one bakery and asking about day-old bread. That's how real self-sufficiency starts. Not with perfect execution, but with consistent small steps that compound over months. And if you want more practical homesteading and survival strategies like this, subscribe to Zero to Purpose. This channel is for people who want real skills and real independence without hype, noise, or unrealistic expectations about how hard this actually is. I'm not here to sell you a fantasy. I'm here to share what genuinely works in real backyards with real constraints. Thanks for spending this time here. I'll see you in the next one.